The first thing Maxi noticed was the fog. Not ordinary fog. Ordinary fog comes quietly, curls around trees, blurs the fence posts and makes the world feel like it has misplaced its edges. This fog had opinions. It moved across the coastline in long grey sheets, whispering over the rocks, slipping between the dunes and wrapping itself around the ankles of every person on the shore. Maxi stood at the edge of the sea with her cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. She wore a deep teal green dress, the colour of water, when it remembers the forest. Over it was a weathered linen cloak, sand-coloured and soft at the edges, fastened with two small brass clasps, shaped like leaves. Her hair had been taken by the wind almost immediately, which meant one side of it looked poetic and the other side looked personally offended. Lucy did not mind the wind. Lucy never minded weather that made an entrance. The Rottweiler stood with her paws planted in the damp sand, sniffing the air as if the fog had hidden snacks in it. Gypsy stood slightly ahead, her ears sharp, her eyes following movements no one else could see. Psycho sat behind Maxi like a black and white mountain that accepted the sea as an interesting but unnecessary disturbance. Before them stretched a wild coastline. The ocean rolled and breathed beneath a sky the colour of old pewter. Waves pressed themselves against the rocks and withdrew again, leaving shining trails of foam. Seabirds circled overhead, crying into the wind. Far above the beach, on a cliff of dark stone, stood a lighthouse. It was tall, it was beautiful, it was silent, and its light was out. Below the cliff, people wandered along the shore. They were not lost in the usual way. They were not calling for help or running in panic. They moved slowly, clutching things to their chests. A woman held a cracked lantern with no glass. A man carried a folded map so wet it had begun to dissolve. An old fisherman had a compass case, but when Maxi passed him, she saw that it was empty. A young mother cupped a tiny flame in both hands, shielding it from the wind with her whole body. A child dragged a little wooden boat behind him on a string, but the boat had no sail. Everyone looked up at the dark lighthouse. Then they looked at one another, and then they looked back at the lighthouse. No one moved towards it. Maxi walked closer to a woman sitting on a piece of driftwood. The woman's lantern lay at her feet. Its handle was bent and one side was blackened by smoke. "What happened?" Maxi asked. The woman glanced at the cliff. The lighthouse went dark. "How long ago?" The woman looked tired enough to have forgotten the meaning of time. Nearby, a man with a damp map shook his head. "Someone should fix it." The child looked up at him. "But who?" The man frowned, as though the child had asked something rude. "Well," he said, "someone official. Someone qualified." "Someone with permission," said a third. "Someone with funding," muttered another. "Someone who knows what they are doing," said the woman on the driftwood. The child looked from face to face. No one looked back at him. Maxi felt the fog press against her skin, and Lucy sneezed. Psycho sighed, deeply and meaningfully, as if humans had once again turned a simple problem into a committee. Gypsy's gaze lifted towards the cliff path. The path was narrow, overgrown, and half hidden by salt grass. Lucy saw it too. Her whole body changed. One moment she was sniffing seaweed, the next she was pulling towards the path with the determination of a dog who had discovered destiny, danger, or possibly a sandwich. "Lucy," said Maxi. "Wait." Lucy did not wait. She looked back once, her eyes bright. Some doors, her expression seemed to say, do not open for certainty. They open for courage. Maxi looked up at the lighthouse again. It stood at the edge of the world, dark against the fog. Then she looked at the people on the shore, each holding something broken, damp, dim, or almost gone. "What if it cannot be fixed?" the woman on the driftwood asked. Maxi did not know the answer. That was very inconvenient. Stories were easier when one arrived with a wise sentence already prepared. But the sea was loud, The lighthouse was dark, and Lucy was already halfway to the cliff path, so Maxi lifted her cloak, called to Psycho and Gypsy, and followed. The cliff path was not friendly. It climbed sharply through grass, stone, thorny roots, and small white flowers that grew in places where flowers had no reasonable business growing. Fog slid across the path in sudden waves. Sometimes Maxi could see 10 steps ahead, sometimes she could only see Lucy's tail. Gypsy moved differently from the others. She did not rush. She listened with her whole body. When the path disappeared, she found it again by scent, stone, wind, and something older than maps. Psycho walked beside Maxi, steady and enormous. Maxi wished she could do that. The higher they climbed, the louder the voices in the fog became. Well, not voices exactly. Thoughts. Old ones. Well-practiced ones. Who do you think you are? Maxi tightened her cloak. What if you fail? She stepped over a root. What if no one follows? Gypsy paused, nose lifted. What if they laugh? Lucy scrambled over a stone and looked back impatiently. What if the light is not enough? Maxi stopped. For a moment, she could not see the shore below or the lighthouse above. There was only fog, wet stone, and the feeling of being very small on a very large earth. Psycho sat down beside her, not because he was tired, because sometimes the most spiritual thing one can do is sit heavily in the middle of someone's panic. Maxi placed one hand on his thick fur. I do not know what I am doing, she whispered. Psycho blinked. This did not appear to trouble him. Lucy trotted back, pressed her wet nose against Maxi's hand, and then turned again towards the path. Gypsy stood ahead, one paw lifted, watching the place where the fog thinned just enough to show the next stone. Not the whole path, just the next stone. Maxi breathed in. Salt, wind, wet earth, dog. She took one step, and then the next. The lighthouse door appeared suddenly, as if the fog had been keeping it secret until the last moment. It was taller than Maxi expected, and made of a dark old wood banded with green brass. The stone around it marked with carvings: sun, moon, bird, wave, root, flame. There was no lock, only words carved into the wood. The light is not owned, it is tended. Lucy sniffed the bottom of the door. Gypsy looked upward. Psycho leaned against the stone wall with a quiet confidence of someone who had always understood stewardship, because dogs do not own love, they offer it. Maxi placed her palm against the door, and it opened. Inside, the lighthouse smelled of salt, dust, brass, and old rope, and the kind of silence that forms when a place has been sitting too long. It was not abandoned. That was the first thing Maxi felt. Abandoned places feel hollow, as if they have exhaled their last breath. This place was holding its breath. The entrance hall was circular and dim. Hooks lined the wall, old coats hung there, stiff with salt. Boots stood beneath them in pairs, some large, some small, some patched carefully at the toe. There were shelves of oil tins, mostly empty. Drawers were filled with tools, coils of rope, lantern grass wrapped in cloth, bundles of dried herbs tied in strings and labelled in handwriting faded by years. Many people lived here, Maxi murmured. Gypsy sniffed the table. Lucy stuck her head into a cupboard and emerged with a very old biscuit. No, said Maxi. Lucy looked injured, and Psycho looked unsurprised. In the centre of the room, a spiral staircase crawled upwards into darkness. But before Maxi climbed it, she noticed a desk beneath a round window, and on the desk lay a journal. Its cover was leather, salt-stained, and soft from many hands. Across the front, someone had burned a single image into the hide, a flame inside a circle of roots. Maxi opened it. The first page read, "A lighthouse is not built for itself." The handwriting was old-fashioned, slanted and careful. It does not ask the ships to admire it. It does not chase the lost. It stands, it tends and shines. Maxi turned the page. The handwriting had changed. This one was rounder. When the fog is thickest, do not curse the fog. Clean the glass. She turned another page. This handwriting was sharp, hurried, and almost angry. The light went out a little at a time, not from one great failure, from small neglects. One person thought another had checked the oil. One person thought another had cleaned the lens. One person said it was not their responsibility. One person said they had done enough. One person said someone official would come. And then the shore went dark. Maxi swallowed. Outside, the fog pressed against the round window. She turned another page. This one was written in dark ink that had not faded. The great light cannot be fed by borrowed flame. Only living flame will hold. Maxi frowned. What is a living flame? The lighthouse creaked. Lucy sneezed again, which was not an answer, but it did at least create atmosphere. Maxi closed her journal gently and tucked it beneath her arm. Come on, she said. The dogs followed her up the spiral stairs. Each level of the lighthouse held remnants of old keeping. On the first floor were maps. Some were beautiful, some were torn, some had entire sections marked unknown. One had a coastline drawn in careful ink, but someone had written across it, "The shore changes, walk it again." On the second floor were old arguments pinned to the walls. Who owns the lamp? Who decides when it shines? Who stands closest? Who is allowed to tend it? Who receives credit? Who is to blame? Maxi did not linger there. Rooms full of old arguments have a way of making even the dust feel self-important. On the third floor were tools. Hammers, brushes, needles, spades, lantern hooks, wooden crates. Nothing glamorous, but everything necessary. On the fourth floor were mirrors clouded by salt. Maxi caught glimpses of herself as she passed. She saw the teal dress, her wind-tangled hair, and a cloak damp at the hem, and eyes uncertain but awake. On the fifth floor were jars, all empty. Psycho sniffed one and looked at Maxi. Yes, she said, I know, not ideal. At last they reached the lantern room. It was magnificent. Even in the dark, it was magnificent. The great glass lens rose in curved panels around the lamp, cracked in places and filled with salt. Brass arms held it in an intricate circle. The lamp itself stood at the center, silent and waiting. Maxi set the journal down. She found some matches in a drawer and she struck one. The little flame flared bright and brave. She touched it to the wick. For one breath, the lamp caught, then it went out again. Maxi tried again. The flame caught, flickered, and died. Again and again and again. Lucy whined, and Gypsy stared into the glass. Psycho lay down on the floor with a low thump. Maxi clenched the matchbox in her hand. I am trying, she said. The lantern room answered with a groan of old wood and turning wind. Not in words, but Maxi heard it anyway. Trying alone is not the same as tending. Maxi did not like that sentence, mostly because it sounded true. So she ignored it and became practical. This is a thing people often do when truth becomes inconvenient. She cleaned the glass and polished the brass. She adjusted the wick, and she opened every cupboard. She searched behind crates, inside tins, behind old cloths, and once inside Lucy's mouth, because Lucy had found another biscuit and was pretending that she had not. Maxi found oil, not much, but she poured it carefully into the lamp, and then she struck another match. The flame rose, and it held, and it grew. Maxi's heart lifted. Then the light shivered and went out. Oh, come on, she whispered. She tried again. Nothing. The fog pressed close to the glass. thick and patient. Maxi sat on the floor beside Psycho and put her head in her hands. "I cannot light it," she said. A voice answered, "No." Maxi froze. Lucy barked once, and Gypsy moved in front of Maxi, calm but ready. Near the lamp stood an old man, or what looked like an old man. He was made of salt wind, lamplight, weathered wool, and kindness. His beard was white as sea foam. His coat looked as though it had been mended by many hands. His eyes held storms, surprises, and the private patience of people who have watched the sea for a long time. Maxi stood up slowly. "Are you a ghost?" The old man considered this. "Ah, only on my tired days," he said. Lucy sniffed him. Her nose passed right through his sleeve. She looked very offended. "I was the keeper," he said, "or one of them. There have been many. I tried everything." Maxi looked at the lamp. "I tried everything." "No," said the keeper gently. "You tried everything you could do alone." Unfortunately, her soul was already nodding. "The soul says the lamp needs living flame," she said. "What is that?" The keeper walked to the glass and looked out at the fog. "A flame carried honestly, a flame given freely, a flame not stolen, borrowed, performed, demanded, purchased, branded, or used to make someone important." "Oh, that's very specific," said Maxi. "Lighthouses are specific things." Maxi looked down at her hands. "I only have one small flame." The keeper smiled. "Then begin with that," he said. "But how?" she asked. "By remembering why you climbed." Maxi looked out through the cracked lens. Below, the shore was hidden, but she knew the people were there, waiting, holding broken lanterns and wet maps. She thought of all the stories that had brought her here. The listening heart, the paper birds, the clock that forgot time, the strings of the almost real, and the masks. All the ways fear tells human beings to wait for permission, to do what love already knows must be done. A small warmth appeared in Maxi's chest. It wasn't dramatic or explosive, not a performance, just a little flame, but steady. She held out her hands. There it was, cupped between her palms, the color of sunrise through honey. Lucy wagged her tail and Gypsy softened. Psycho gave a solemn blink, which in Malamute language meant, obviously. Maxi stepped towards the lamp and placed a little flame inside. The wick caught. This time the lamp glowed longer. Warmth moved through the lantern room, and the lens shimmered. For a moment Maxi saw the beam forming, but then the light dimmed. It did not die completely, but it was not enough to turn the lens. Maxi's shoulders fell. The keeper looked at her with great gentleness. A beacon is not made by one soul burning itself empty. The words moved through the room, and Maxi closed her eyes. She had known many people who have tried to become lighthouses by setting themselves on fire. Healers, mothers, fathers, teachers, friends and builders, dreamers, people who gave until there was nothing left, then called the emptiness devotion. She opened her eyes. What do I do? The keeper pointed downward. Below the lantern room hung an old bronze bell. Its rope trailed through the floor beside the stairs. Gypsy found it first, and Lucy got to it second. She seized the rope in her mouth and pulled. The bell rang, deep, old, clear, not like an alarm, more like remembrance. The sound rolled through the lighthouse, down the cliff, across the fog, over the shore, and into every pair of waiting hands. At first, no one came. This did not surprise Maxi. People often mistake the first call for someone else's responsibility. The bell rang again. Gypsy stood beside the rope, eyes fixed on the fog below. Lucy pulled once more. The bell answered. Psycho rose and walked to the open door below. His great shape filled the entrance, as if he had been appointed guardian of beginnings. Then footsteps sounded on the cliff path, slow, uncertain. A child arrived first, the same child who had asked, "Who?" He carried his little wooden boat beneath one arm and a tiny flame in a shell. Behind him came the woman with the cracked lantern, then the old fisherman with the empty compass case, then the young mother with a flame cupped in both hands, and then others. A builder, a gardener, a tired healer, a man with rope burns on his palms, an elder with white hair and bare feet, a young woman carrying seeds in a cloth pouch, a quiet person who had no lantern at all, only one ember held inside a spoon. They climbed into the lantern room, breathing hard, cheeks wet with fog, eyes wide. Some looked ashamed of how small their flames were. Some hid their broken lanterns behind their backs. Some apologized before anyone had asked them for anything. The keeper looked at each one. No honest flame is too small for a beacon. The child lifted his shell. "It keeps going out." "Then we shelter it together," said Maxi. The woman with the cracked lantern looked at the lamp. "Who will own the light if we help?" The room shifted. There it was, the old question, the one that waits beneath so many good beginnings. Who owns it? Who controls it? Who gets the credit? Who stands closest and who decides who belongs? A man in a dark coat stepped forward. "If we are bringing flame, we need rules." "Yes," said another, "before anyone else gives anything." "I brought more than most," said a third. "That should count." "The lighthouse should be fenced," someone said. "It should be sold," another said. "It should be branded. It should be registered. It should be managed by proper people." The lamp flickered. The little flame Maxi had placed inside it bent low. Maxi felt a familiar tightening in her chest. The old theatre again. Different costumes, same strings, approval, control, fear, ownership. The need to make sacred things into systems that can be guarded, sold, ranked, and used as proof of importance. Lucy growled, not too loudly, but just enough. The keeper did not speak. He simply looked at Maxi, and she stepped forward. Her cloak moved in the wind that slipped through the cracked glass. "This light is not for display," she said. The room quietened. "It is not for a person's name. It is not for power. It is not for pretending to be good. It is not for owning the shore, the sea, the path, the flame, or each other." The child watched her closely. Maxi looked around the room. "It is for the lost, the tired, the children, the animals, the land and the sea, the ones still finding their way, the ones who have forgotten they are allowed to come ashore." The young mother lowered her eyes. Maxi's eyes softened. "We have all been drifting for too long." Outside, the fog moved against the glass. "We learned how to survive storms. We learned how to wait. We learned how to follow other people's maps. We learned how to ask permission to stand on ground that was already beneath our feet." The elder with bare feet began to cry. Maxi continued, "Sea legs help you survive the storm." The keeper smiled. "But land legs," Maxi said, "help you build after it." The room went very still. The old fisherman looked down at his boots, and the woman with a cracked lantern touched the stone wall. The child placed one hand on the floor. Maxi felt something shift, not in the lighthouse, but in the people. Some had lived so long as passengers in someone else's order that standing felt rebellious. Some had mistaken drifting for peace. Some had mistaken permission for safety. Some had forgotten that living men and women of the land do not wait forever at the shoreline. They remember the ground beneath them. They tend, they build, they plant, they protect, they gather, and they stand, not as owners of the earth, but as stewards of it. Not as subjects waiting for rescue, as living souls answering a sacred responsibility. One by one the people removed their wet shoes. The child did it first, because children often understand ceremony before adults make it complicated. He placed his bare feet on the stone floor. The woman with the cracked lantern followed, then the fisherman and the builder and the tired healer. Soon the lantern room was filled with people standing barefoot on old stone, holding tiny flames, broken lanterns, empty jars, and hope that had nearly gone out. The keeper opened the journal to a blank page. "Not a contract of ownership," he said. "A vow of tending." He placed the journal on the lamp table. "Speak only what you are willing to serve." The first person stepped forward. "I will tend the children." The lamp brightened. Another one said, "I will mend what I can." Someone else said, "I will tend the soil." "I will clean the glass." Another said, "I will speak honestly." Someone else said, "I will rest before resentment." The tired healer laughed softly through tears. "I will learn that one slowly." The lamp warmed. A farmer lifted his little flame. "I will tend the water." A young person held up a pouch of seeds. "And I will plant what still wants to live." An elder placed both hands over her heart. "I will remember what must not be forgotten." The child looked at his wooden boat. "I will ask better questions." The lamp glowed even brighter. Then the dog stepped forward. No one had asked them to. They did not need vows written in human language. Psycho came first. He stood beside the lamp, enormous and calm. His flame was his presence, the kind that does not panic, perform, or abandon. It entered the lamp like warm stone. Gypsy stepped forward next. Her flame was discernment, the kind that sees through fog, follows hidden paths, and knows the difference between danger and noise. It entered the lamp like a silver wind. Lucy trotted forward last, tail high. Her flame was courage, the kind that acts before certainty has finished its speech. It entered the lamp like a spark striking dry wood. The great light rose. Maxi laughed through tears. Of course, the dogs also had flames. They had never needed to announce them. The lamp filled with living flame, not one color, but many. Gold, amber, white, and green, rose and blue. The colors moved together without swallowing one another. The cracked lanes around the lamp began to tremble. At first, Maxi thought it was breaking. Then she saw the cracks filling with light. The glass did not become perfect. That mattered. It did not erase every fracture. Instead, the broken pieces joined into something more beautiful than smoothness. And the lens started turning slowly, with a deep sound like the earth remembering a song. Dust lifted from the brass. The old gears started moving. The lighthouse hummed through the stone, stair, door, and cliff, and then the beam broke free. It swept across the lantern room, over the faces of the people, through the salt-streaked glass, and out into the fog. For one breath nothing happened, but then the mist lit from within. The beam moved over the sea, over the rocks, and over the shore. It did not banish the fog completely. That was not the work of a lighthouse. The fog remained, but the path through it appeared. Below, people who had stayed on the shore began to move. One repaired a broken lantern. Another unfolded a damp map beside someone else's. Children gathered driftwood and shells. A fisherman began mending nets. A woman lit a cooking fire between stones. An elder sat near the path, and people came to ask where the spring had once been. Someone found it. Someone cleared it. Someone planted herbs beside it. Someone opened an old gate, and someone made tea. Lucy watched from the lantern room window, deeply approving of the tea. The coastline was still wild, the world was still uncertain, and the fog still came and went. But the people were no longer only waiting, they were tending. Maxi stood at the balcony outside the lantern room, wind pulling at her cloak. The lighthouse beam swept over the water, then over the shore, and then inland. For a moment, the light reached further than distance shall allow. It moved across hills and river bends, across grasslands and old paths, across a place Maxi did not know with her mind, but recognized somewhere deeper. A place of open sky, a river moving towards the sea, dogs running freely over grass, people gathered around a long table. Gardens, workshops, healing rooms, and children planting seeds. A bell hanging where people could hear it when the fog came. A lighthouse, not necessarily made of stone, but a beacon, a place where land, people, animals, water, work, healing, and hope were not separate things. A place not held like a trophy, a place tended like a promise. Maxi gripped the balcony rail. She did not say its name. She did not know whether it had one yet. But something inside her answered, not loudly and not dramatically, like a flame that had found oxygen. The old keeper stood beside her. "Do not confuse the lighthouse with the light," he said. Maxi looked at him. "A building may hold it," he continued. "A place may protect it. A community may tend it. But the light itself belongs to no one." "How do we keep it alive?" Maxi asked. The keeper smiled. "Return daily, clean the glass, share the tending, welcome honest flames, refuse false ownership, and never let the beacon become more important than the lives that it serves." Maxi looked down at the shore. People were still clumsy, some still tired, some uncertain, but at least they were moving. They were standing, helping and building. They were finding their land legs. The keeper's voice softened. "Remember this too. A lighthouse does not chase the lost." Maxi listened. "It does not force ships to turn. It does not drag people from the fog. It does not shout at the sea for being dark." "What does it do?" asked the child, who had followed them onto the balcony and was holding his wooden boat against his chest. The keeper looked at him kindly. "It shines." The child considered this. "That sounds simple." "It is," said the keeper. Then he smiled at Maxi. "Which is why humans often make it complicated." Psycho gave a low huff. It was unclear whether he was agreeing with the keeper or simply tired of humans. Well, both, most likely. Morning came slowly. The fog thinned, but it did not vanish. Stories sometimes rush too quickly toward clear skies, as if truth means never again walking through mist. But real hope is not the absence of fog. It is the presence of light within it. The lighthouse still shone. Its beam turned gently over sea and shore, steady as breath. Below, the people had begun making places, not grandly, not perfectly. A circle of stones for fire, a table made from driftwood, a shelf for shared tools, a dry corner for the maps. A patch of cleared earth where the young person with the seeds knelt beside the child, showing him how to press life into soil. Maxi and the dogs walked down the cliff path. This time, the stones were easier to see. Lucy trotted ahead, and Gypsy paused often to watch the horizon. Psycho walked last, as if ensuring that the lighthouse did not wander off. At the bottom of the path, the woman with a cracked lantern approached Maxi. Her lantern was still cracked, but someone had fitted new glass into one side. A small flame burned inside it. "Will you stay?" the woman asked. Maxi looked back at the lighthouse and then inland, where the beam had shown her that impossible, familiar place. "I do not know," she said. It was the honest answer, and the woman nodded. Honest answers do not always satisfy that part of us that wants certainty, but they do feed the part that wants truth. The child held up his wooden boat. "I gave it a sail," he said. He had tied a scrap of cloth to a small stick. "That looks very fine," said Maxi. "It's not for drifting anymore," he said. "It's for remembering the sea." Maxi smiled. "That's a good use for a boat." The child looked at her feet. "You took your shoes off too." Maxi looked down. Oh, she had forgotten. Her boots hung by their laces over one shoulder. Her bare feet stood on damp sand and earth, cold and real. The ground did not ask her for a title. It did not ask for a certificate. It did not ask whether she had permission to belong to life. It simply held. Maxi felt something settle inside her. Sovereignty was not a costume. It was not a slogan. It was not a mask of defiance. It was a way of standing, a way of belonging. a way of remembering that no one becomes free by floating forever. At some point, the soul must come ashore. The old keeper's voice moved through the wind one last time. Some lights are not meant to be admired from far away. They are meant to be tended. Some land is not meant to be owned like a trophy. It was meant to be loved into remembrance. And some dreams do not arrive as plans. They arrive first as a flame, small and steady, waiting for hands brave enough to carry it home. Maxi placed one hand over her heart. There it was, not a blazing command, not a map, not a guarantee, but a flame. The dogs gathered near her. Lucy sat on a foot, because Lucy believed all sacred moments could be improved by full body contact. Gypsy leaned against her leg, eyes on the path ahead. Psycho stood beside her, black and white and utterly himself, looking towards the inland hills as though he had already decided the next chapter would require space, shade, and a proper place to nap. Maxi looked once more at the lighthouse. The beam turned, over sea, over shore, over people finding their land legs, over the path, and over the place that was calling. Then she stepped forward, not because she knew everything, and not because the fog was gone, not because the world had become safe enough, not because the light was alive, but because the light was alive, and so was she. Much later, after the shore had grown quieter and the first true gardens had taken root near the path, someone found a new page in the keeper's journal. No one knew who had written it. The handwriting was clear, and it said, "A beacon is not made by one person burning alone. It is made when many honest flames gather around what is sacred and agree to tend it together. The light is not owned, it is tended. The land is not conquered, it is remembered. And whenever the fog returns, as fog sometimes will, begin again. Clean the glass, share the flame, stand on the earth, listen for what is calling. Then tend the light you have been given."